what I wanted to do is just give you guys a few reminders about the problem and solution essay. Um, all right, so first of all, I can just kind of walk you through the outline that we went over in class that you have on Blackboard under course materials, lessons, and lectures. Okay, so some important things to remember when you are writing your problem and solution rough draft. Remember that the background information explains what the problem is. Okay, so the problem that you're planning to solve should be explained in detail in your introduction, after the hook, before your thesis. Okay? Your thesis, which of course should be the last sentence of your introduction, needs to be open, right? So you're not going to have 3 points. And it should just, in kind of a general way, explain what your solution to the aforementioned problem is. Okay, so of course you're going to be writing this in 3 body paragraphs, so you might have 3 separate facets to your solution. So you want to think about a general way that you can, introduce your solution that kind of encompasses all 3 of the facets that you're going to discuss in your body paragraphs. Okay? So, hook, background, establishing the problem; open thesis, establishing the general idea of what your solution is. Okay, here I have my points of development just so that I know them. Remember that each body paragraph should start with a topic sentence that introduces that aspect of the solution, right? And then each body paragraph should explain only that aspect of the solution, right? So, for example, in this sample outline, my first body paragraph is going to be the aspect of the solution that revolves around fair rights and access to assistance, and so everything that I talk about is going to relate to that. When we talked about in class our sample outline, when we were talking about the solution to COVID-19, one of our body paragraphs was about the hygiene aspect of the solution. So that body paragraph would only discuss the hygiene aspect. Then, of course, I want to make sure that I weave in an outside source in each body paragraph. You can paraphrase or you can use a direct quote. Remember that you always need to introduce your quote, you always need to use a parenthetical citation, and you always need to follow up your quote with discussion. Okay, so we have our body paragraphs, right? 3 body paragraphs discussing the details of our proposed solution. Then we have our counter argument. Okay, so the thing that I really want to stress is that your counter argument is not arguing, it's not arguing for the problem, right? So my counter argument here, in my sample essay about, fair rights for immigrants, and, fixing the problem of detention camps at the border, my counter argument isn't going to argue that, these camps are good or that immigrants should be detained, right? My counter argument is going to argue the reasons why my solution won't work, right? So it would be basically if I came to someone and I said, I think I can solve the problem, and then they pointed out all the reasons that my solution, wasn't actually good, okay? So remember that that's what you need to do in the counter argument, and it shouldn't include any refutation, okay? So just like with your previous argumentative essay, you're having a counter-argument paragraph followed by a refutation paragraph. The refutation paragraph should, basically explain in the same order as your counter-argument paragraph, why those counterpoints are incorrect, right? So here I pointed out, 3 reasons that my solution won't work. And then in the same order, I refute those 3 reasons why my solution won't work to prove that it actually will work. Okay? Then, of course, in the conclusion, restate my thesis in a new way, universalize, try to think of some way that the solution can maybe be expanded to kind of a more broad application, right? So if you're solving a really specific problem, you could think about, well, how could this type of solution be extended to other problems, or what aspects of this solution can anyone relate to, even if they don't think it'll work, even if they don't think that whatever the problem is as big a problem as I'm suggesting. Okay. All right, so those are all of the main things to remember about the actual body of the essay. Let me see. Before we talk about the annotated bibliography, I just want to remind you guys about some logistical things. So you need to have at least 5 sources, right? I would suggest having at least 1 source in each body paragraph. Often it's good to have at least 1 source in your counter argument and refutation paragraphs. You might also have a source in your introduction. In fact, you probably will, because you're going to want to include evidence for the background information, and you might also want to use a quote for your hook. Okay, so you want to have at least 5 sources. You want to make sure you have an annotated bibliography, and I'm just going to give you guys a few reminders about that. And then remember that you have to have a reflection memo. Obviously, that is not something that you need to be worrying about yet, but I just like to reiterate it whenever I can, so that you don't forget, because sometimes it feels like such a minor thing that actually has, kind of a heavy impact on the final grade. Okay, so one thing to note is that on Blackboard, I created, I'm sure you know this by now, I created this folder under assignments and tests called Assignments for Online Classes. There's a Dropbox for the rough draft of your essay, and there's a Dropbox for the annotated bibliography. Both of these are optional. I would suggest submitting both of them so that you can get my feedback, but this isn't a graded assignment, so if you submit it, you're gonna get a 0, and that's not because you're not getting credit, it's because the feedback is solely for your benefit, so that you have that feedback before you write your final draft, especially because I haven't really figured out an efficient way to do peer reviews. So this essay is not going to be peer reviewed. So I would say, certainly have someone in your life review it if they can, and I would suggest sending it to me for feedback as well. If you feel great about annotated bibliographies, you don't have to send me a rough draft of that. Again, I suggest it. But they're two separate Dropboxes. They are in this Assignments for Online Classes folder. The final draft Dropbox is where it always was, right? So I didn't change any Dropboxes, but the new ones that I've added are in that new folder. Okay. So then the annotated bibliography, all of this is on Blackboard, of course. This is the main thing to remember. So you have your annotated bibliography. Each citation entry should be in the same format as it would be in your MLA format works cited page, except you're going to call it annotated bibliography, not works cited. And underneath each entry, you're going to answer these questions. Okay, so you're going to give a brief summary of the source. You're going to explain why it's a valuable source in general, right, to anyone doing research. You can also kind of talk about the credibility or reliability of the source. And then specifically, why is the source useful to your research, right? So why is this source really valuable to the essay that you're writing? And then I have my sample annotations, right? So just a few different sample annotations that you're welcome to take a look at and kind of model your annotations off of. Okay, I think that's it for now. If you have questions, feel free to email me, send me a text. We're also going to be having our first Blackboard Collaborate meeting tomorrow at 11. So, although I don't know when you're watching this video. So when I say tomorrow at 11, I mean Wednesday, March 25th at 11. So anyway, I will, of course, be answering questions then. All right, hope this was helpful.